Hey, it's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today I want to talk about ballast on a tractor. I talk about ballast quite a bit on the channel, so if you're a regular viewer and this is a broken record, I apologize, but I think it's one of the most important conversations that we need to have about operating a tractor, and I realized I don't have a comprehensive video breaking down all the aspects of it. So today I want to talk about why it matters so much, and what the most cost-effective solutions are, and the most convenient for ease of use or ease of setup are. So let's start with the why. Why is it so important to talk about ballast? Well, last week I did a video about tractor rollovers and my thoughts on how we can prevent or reduce the risk of a tractor rollover. And about 50% of the answer to that question is just being properly ballasted. But it's actually more than that, because being properly ballasted increases the capabilities to get work done, and it protects the machine on some level from being damaged. Adding rear ballast allows you to lift more with the loader. Within reason, you have a set capability you can't go beyond, but to reach that, you have to be ballasted. And as we go through this conversation, you need to think about your tractor like a teeter-totter, but it's a little more complicated than that because there are two potential fulcrums. So if you think about a stock tractor you just purchased, it has no rear implement, it has no extra weight added, and you go to lift something with the front end. Your front axle is a fulcrum now, just like a teeter-totter, and when you try to lift on the front, the back comes off the ground. And you won't get your lift capacity before you lift the back of the tractor off the ground. And in that scenario, you're teetering on the front axle. And a front axle on these tractors can be kind of a weak point, as they're not rated to hold as much weight as you might think. So what you want to do is move the fulcrum to the rear axle. Let's say another hypothetical situation that isn't realistic. Let's say you put 5,000 pounds of ballast on the back of your tractor. I don't even know how you do that, but just say you just had a ridiculous amount of weight back here. Then you go to lift something up. Your fulcrum is now the rear axle. There's always some pressure on both until you lift the rear off the ground, but there's always some pressure on both. But if you've got enough weight on the back, you're shifting that pressure off of the front axle onto the rear axle, and obviously your rear axle can hold up to a lot more stress. So that's how ballast helps you with capability and protecting your front axle from damage and extra strain. I wanted to start off with the fulcrum conversation because everything else we talk about in terms of types of ballast is dependent on understanding that the further back the ballast sets, the more it helps you. So 500 pounds at the wheel is not the same as 500 pounds 4 foot behind the wheel, which isn't the same as 6 foot behind the wheels. So just keep that in mind as we talk about these numbers. So now, what's the cheapest or most convenient type of ballast? And I'm going to say that anyone who owns a tractor has some type of a rear implement. You already own it, keep it on the back all the time. It's essentially free. The problem is, that's not enough ballast. My operator's manual gives you minimum ballast requirements for lifting with the loader, and I'd say all the other manufacturers are that way as well. It is interesting that I don't believe any of them give you a maximum ballast amount, because you'll be limited by what your 3-point can lift and what your tires can hold. So we start off with a free ballast of the attachment we already own, and we also know that that's not heavy enough. So how do we get more ballast? So let's go to the next cheapest option, and that is fluid in the rear tires. Now, that fluid is further forward, so it doesn't help you in the same way, but it definitely, in my opinion, is worth doing. And for me, it was the most cost effective. Courtney from GoodWorks Tractor did a cost comparison on ballast, and he came up with $1.29 per pound for ballast in his tires. And I think the larger the tire, the cheaper it becomes. As you have more fluid, the fluid is not the expensive part, it's the labor and the valve stem and anything else they charge you. So on mine, I paid $250 for 530 pounds. So that's less than 50 cents per pound of ballast that I added. It's very convenient. I don't have any maintenance. It doesn't get in the way. It's just there all the time. The only way there's an inconvenience with the fluid in the tires is if you get a punctured tire, which I had happen. I've got a video on the channel showing how a professional mobile repair technician came out, fixed the tire, refilled it with ballast, and it was pretty cool. I'll link to that at the end if you want to see it. So after filling the tires, your next cost-effective option is a ballast box. And the price on this is going to vary wildly. I'll start by talking about the type that I have, which isn't actually a ballast box, it's a weight bracket that's fairly inexpensive, but the weights for it are not inexpensive. It's about $1 per pound for suitcase weights. And when you're talking about ideally, you would hang 1,000 pounds on the back of your tractor, that's a lot of money for ballast. That's why a lot of people get a ballast box that might be $200 for a box that goes on your 3-point, and you can fill it with concrete or old weights, chunks of iron, whatever you've got to save some money. And that could potentially, depending on how you do it, be cheaper than fluid in the tires. But actually probably not per pound, because the ballast box costs almost as much as it cost me to have fluid added. The downside to a ballast box is it's not the most convenient thing, because you can't do any work with it really. The heavy hitch bracket does allow you to have your weight bracket on and another attachment, but most people aren't doing it that way. So for the most part, you're putting this box on only for the purpose of adding weight, and you can't do anything else with it. And then you have to manually take it on and off, and it's in the way and things like that. So if you're doing a ballast box, the most convenient way is probably a concrete filled box with a quick hitch setup that you can just set it down and pick it up. Whether you go with a ballast box or not, I do think it can be a good idea to pick up a few suitcase weights. So if I've got my box blade on, most of the time I have suitcase weights hanging around it to add a few hundred pounds. One great scenario would be to use the backhoe as a ballast all the time, but that's a $9,000 ballast, so you're not going to buy one just for that. But if you happen to have a backhoe, it makes a great ballast, because in a tippy situation, you can put your outriggers out, you can extend your boom as a counterweight, and it makes a great ballast, but it also sticks way out the back, and you got the risk of running it into something or damaging it, and you have to take it off the next time you want to do something. So it's not necessarily the most convenient thing just to leave your backhoe on all the time. The next option for adding ballast is wheel weights. This is the most expensive way to add weight to your tractor, and it sets up further like the fluid in the tires and doesn't help you quite as much as the ballast on the back of the tractor. I paid $400 per set of wheel weights, and each set is 2 60-pound weights. So you're talking about almost $4, $3.50 per pound for those wheel weights. That's a lot of money for that weight. I have all 3 sets. We're talking about $1,200 for 360 pounds of weight. I did it. I would actually do it again, because it's not an either or, it's an and. Wheel weights and 3-point ballast and fluid. But if you're only doing 2 of these methods, which I would recommend at least 2 methods, then your least effective and least cost effective is the wheel weights. So the specs on this tractor say it weighs like, I think 2,500 pounds without the loader and 2,900 pounds with the loader. Mine weighs 6,000 pounds, because I just think having that much ballast is important. And the only downside, I've listed off every reason you want ballast. The only negative is you might leave tracks in your yard. And to me, that's not even a consideration. If you only mow and your yard's flat, maybe all you ever need is a simple ballast box, but that's not the case for most of us. As I talk about how heavy my tractor is, my dealership sold me a trailer to haul this tractor with, and it worked perfectly fine for a stock tractor. But the way I have it configured, it was inadequate. It was over the weight rating of the trailer, and you could see it bowing the deck. So keep in mind what your tractor weighs when you buy it and what it's going to weigh when you're running it, when you're deciding what kind of trailer to get. I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. I'll put links over here to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.